And you're still with us on Rise and Shine, Asanda Beda and Peter Ndoro. Let's look into this story now, which we touched on yesterday, but just getting more and other angles to it. The International Labour Organization's World Day Against Child Labour is being observed today to highlight the plight of children engaged in child labour and is intended to serve as a catalyst for the growing worldwide movement against child labour. Worst forms of child labour include sexual exploitation and trafficking. To speak to us about the significance of this day, we're joined on the line by Briede, who is Director at Save the Children South Africa. Megan, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
So as I said, we had this conversation yesterday with UNICEF, a representative from UNICEF, but we understand that there was a study conducted by you guys, not you guys, sorry, the International Labour Organization as well as UNICEF, and now we get a perspective from Save the Children South Africa. But yesterday in our chats, we cited some examples of how children can be involved in child labour and the sectors that are most prevalent. Mentioned amongst those was agriculture, and I think it was domestic work, if I remember correctly. Yeah. In your experience, what are you seeing the sectors being that are notoriously known for employing children?
Absolutely. So I think agriculture is definitely the standout, and particularly because it's seasonal. So, whenever there's harvesting, more labour is needed, and you do tend to see children drawn in, and because it's cheaper to use children. And of course, domestic work. So the challenge there is, it's very long hours. It's very hidden because it's usually within a person's home. So it's very hard to identify and root out these situations. And in South Africa, we definitely see street trading and the more informal work. So hawking, car guarding, and a lot of children involved in recycling. So we have a lot of squatter camps that have developed around our big dumps. And in those settings, you will see children collecting materials for recycling. And of course, sexual exploitation and trafficking is the worst form and the most, underground that we know.
Do we have estimates in terms of figures of children involved in child labour? As you say, it's difficult to tally because, as you say, in the industries that these kids are employed in, they would be hidden.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we can always say there's lots of studies that have been done, but we always call them our guesstimates, and they range from 5% to 17%, and that's for children 5 to 14, because we need to remember that from 15 upwards it's looked at, you can legally work in South Africa. So these are the children that are underage and should not be actively working within the sector.
What effects does child labour have on children, especially those who are in sexually exploited sectors or labour and even trafficked?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, any kind of extreme violations of rights, such as sexual exploitation of young people, will lead to both physical and mental health issues, particularly anxiety and depression. And we definitely know that young people drawn into sexual exploitation are exposed to substance abuse, so drug addiction. We know those that are trafficking them use these substances to keep young people, controlled. So I think those are your biggest. But I think very importantly, just generally in child labour, our biggest challenge is the educational setbacks, as children are forced to try and balance access to school as well as working. And this is seen a lot more where it's family businesses. So you're trying to help your parent in their business. You have an expectation maybe to be in the shop, the spaza shop, for example, a certain amount of time during a day or a week. And this then sets these young people back in their education.
So how do we really differentiate then between a child helping out in a family business and them being involved in child labor, which is not what they're supposed to be doing? As you say, as parents, we might want our kids to learn how to run the businesses that we have, or just to even, educate them in terms of how they need to take care of themselves later in life. So where do we draw the line?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a life skill, and we do want to see our children understanding and valuing work. But very importantly, it's when one outweighs the other, and there's normative behavior or ways that we know children should be behaving or the way they should be experiencing life. So we know that the majority of their day should be focused on attending school, engaging with friends in play. Those are their key activities, really, as children under 15. So as soon as one supersedes the other, and what you're seeing is a child is now in the shop or in the field more than is the norm, then we have a problem. So I think, that's the way you balance it. If my child should be at school for 5 hours a day, they shouldn't have to also work for 5 hours a day. If they're helping me on a Saturday for an hour or two in a shop, that's a different story. That's participating within my family environment.
Interesting for me is I was watching a documentary yesterday. We have a world where we live in social media, and there's a thing called kidfluencers, influencers on social media who are children. And these kids are encouraged by their parents to either post videos of themselves dancing or maybe posting toys and their favorite things. And they're making money out of this. Would that be something that is regarded as well as child labor?
Absolutely. It's a new area that we're all trying to navigate, but it can be looked at in many circumstances as exploitation, especially if the family is deriving a significant income from that child. There have been cases that have been taken to court, not really in South Africa, but internationally, where it's become very clear that family is becoming, when families become dependent on the income that the child is generating, you then know you have a problem, because again, that often takes away from the child. And just that exposure online, we need to also talk about and think about the risks that children are placed under the more they're exposed online.
Talk to us about some of the work that Save the Children is doing within this regard, and globally what we need to do to end or combat child labor.
Absolutely. So at Save the Children South Africa, our first focus around child labor is, of course, advocacy, and we need to ensure that our country has the correct legislation in place. In the amendments to the Children's Bill, we have recommended some changes specifically around defining what is hazardous work, so that we're clearer with regards to ability to take action if we think children are being exposed. So we would always be at that level, being the voice for our children, where we believe children's rights are violated. But very importantly, we're also there to receive reports or concerns and to make sure that these are channeled into the right spaces and that action is taken when any child is at risk. Internationally, what is essential is that we really focus on the SDGs. Its goal 8.7, I think that focuses on issues of child labor and addressing issues of supply chain. So we might be sitting here happily drinking our coffee or eating our chocolate, but we need to be asking, how was that produced? And was it produced ethically? And in that chain, were children exploited? And that's the awareness that we need, and that's why we need to deal with it as an international issue, because we all link to each other.
Absolutely. Megan, thank you so much again for your time, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Megan Briede is director at Save the Children South Africa, talking to us about child labor.
A fresh morning,